about maybe finding the first letter or the first line of something? Or how about going in and doing something different based on selection? Because, you know, I don't know about you, but I've never been a huge fan of the blue background, white text. You know, wouldn't it be nice to kind of do a yellow highlight? I mean, really, when you think about highlighting, what do you think of?
A highlighter.
Absolutely.
It's funny because this is something Chris really, really cares about. He made me change the highlighting in Visual Studio yesterday to yellow.
That's a true story. I did in fact do that. Yes. See, it has to be yellow. All right. Everybody has their thing.
Yeah.
Okay. But in any event, so I want to make that yellow. Now, let's compare and contrast here. So when I hover over those little links, I'm hovering over the entire link, so that entire element. And if you remember, classes apply to element, so that's a pseudo class. If I highlight a section like I've done here, I've highlighted a portion of an element. So not the entire element, just a portion of the element. If we're going to be talking about first line, which is just going to be that right there, that's just that first line. So again, it's a portion of an element. So a pseudo element is where we're actually going to be creating an element on the fly. Now look, I know some of you are probably thinking, wow, that really seems to be, you know, kind of splitting hairs. That's really kind of a semantic argument. And I'm with you. I generally don't focus too much on pseudo class versus pseudo element. The syntax is slightly different. You are going to notice that it's going to be a single colon versus a double colon. But here's the thing. With Visual Studio, if you hit a colon, it's automatically going to show you all of the pseudo classes, 1 colon, and all of the pseudo elements, 2 colons, right there. So if you don't want to have to worry about trying to remember whether or not something was, 2 colons or 1 colon, you don't have to worry about it. Just, let Visual Studio kind of do its thing. And if you don't want to have to remember the little debate about, pseudo elements versus pseudo classes, that's fine. You don't have to. That's the good news. Okay. Let's do a demo here. So let me go back in and let's go grab our little div tags and let's go in and say div, and I am going to do our selection, and you'll notice that I typed in colon and selection. So I didn't even type in the second colon, but again, the IntelliSense still works. So let's go ahead and take advantage of that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say color colon black, and I'm going to say background color colon yellow. There we go. And then let's also go in and say div colon, and I'm going to say my first letter, and let's go in and let's say font size, and let's make this nice and big. So let's say 36 pixels. And let's go in and say div first line. There we go. And let's go in and say font size, and let's make that 24. Let's also kind of make it a little bit more obvious as well. Let's go in and say font color. Oh, it's not font color. I knew I was going to do that eventually as well. And let's just make that green. Okay. 24 pixels. Cool. So now, if I come back over here to Visual Studio and I hit refresh, here's what I want you to notice. Is you're going to notice, sure enough, that first line is green. And you're going to notice that that first character is nice and big. And you're also going to notice, there we go, yellow background. See, that makes me happy when I go in and I select it. But my browser and all of that is set currently to full screen. So my first line is going from here to here. Okay, fine. But how about if I were to go in and I were to resize this? You'll notice that when I resize this, that it's still just that first line. There's no JavaScript here. None whatsoever. This is all based on CSS. And in fact, when we get into a later module, one of the things that I'm going to talk about is really try to avoid JavaScript. If you can get CSS to do it, let CSS do it. That's going to make your life that much easier. Okay, in any event, let me also do this real quick. Yeah.
Yeah, so when Christopher was highlighting, you might have noticed that the first letter was still blue when he selected it, but everything else was yellow.
Keep talking.
And that's because, as we said before, it's what you select. What was the phrase that you used? The last...
Oh, last right.
Last right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so you'll see in the code that the selection is being used before, or I guess this is much better to say, the first child is set after the selection is set,
right.
So that, in essence, overwrites that.
Exactly. Exactly. And you could go in and start moving things around and tweak things. And that's where, going in and testing all of that really becomes very important. Okay. Now, sort of in the background, one of the things that I want you to notice is I made a real quick change here. And again, this sort of goes back to one of the things that we talked about earlier, is that you'll notice that I was able to do nav a : hover. So that's only going to apply to a tags inside of nav. And if we came back to our article and we kind of think about what it is that I was trying to accomplish here, is I want the first paragraph to be big, because that's probably where the important stuff is, and I want the first line to be big, and I want the first letter, just for stylizing things, I want that to be big. So I want all of that to really be highlighted. But I only want that really for just the first paragraph inside of each section. So for the second paragraph, I just want it to be normal. Just, back to the way that it was. And if you remember, the way that I had it the first time, which was like this, little musical interlude for you. There we go. Let's go back in, hit refresh. And you'll notice, here's a second paragraph right here, and you'll notice that that first line is big and it's green and my first letter is nice and big. That's not what I wanted. That's not what I wanted. I just wanted that for that first paragraph. And sure enough, we can combine all of these as much as we want. So we can get as explicit on identifying the elements as we need to. So it makes it gives us a lot of power in going in and finding what we want.
Yeah. So again, because I see these in the questions.
Yeah.
Why is it that we use one set of colons for first child and two sets of colons for first letter? It's because, well, actually, Christopher,
sure.
You can answer this.
Here, let me just go in and do this. Is that one set of colon? This is for our pseudo class, and then the second set of colon is a pseudo element. So two sets of colon is a pseudo element. The one set of colon is a pseudo class. And about the best analogy that I can give, and forgive me, this is the best one that I can come up with. I took 4 years of French in high school. Bonjour, comment allez-vous? Je m'appelle Christopher. Ma grand-mère est flambée et le singe est disparu, which is a horrible, horrible American accent way of saying, hello, my name is Christopher. My grandmother's on fire and the monkey has disappeared. At least I think that's what I said. In any event, one of the hardest things that I struggled with when I was trying to learn French was trying to remember the genders of everything. So la versus la. And in a lot of ways, I think that's sort of the same thing here, is that pseudo class versus pseudo element. Is there a difference? Technically, yes, there is, because pseudo class is going to apply to the entire class. When you hover over something, you're hovering over, the entire element. When you hover over something, you're hovering over that entire element. When you select something, though, or when you talk about first letter, or you talk about first line, that's a portion of an element. So hover, you're hovering over the entire element. First letter, that's a portion of an element. So hover, because of the fact that it's already going to apply to an entire element, that's a class. The first letter, because of the fact that that's only a portion of an element, we need to create a brand new one. We need to do it on the fly. It's a pseudo element. That's why it's a pseudo element. That's honestly a very academic thing. I wouldn't really worry about trying to commit all of that to memory and just let Visual Studio sort of guide you. I'll be honest, that's all that I ever do. The only time that I ever worry about pseudo class versus pseudo element is when I'm teaching CSS. When I'm using CSS, I'm not even thinking about it. Then I'm just going in, a colon, and then just finding the item that I want. And if Visual Studio throws in a second colon, fantastic. And if it doesn't, fantastic. And I'm being real here. That's the way that I do it. I'm sure that's the way that you do it. And anybody else who's experienced with CSS, I'm certain that's the way that they do it as well. So if you want to get very, very technical, very, very propeller head, that's the difference between the two. Personally, I wouldn't worry too much about it.
Yeah. Some of you are also asking, why do the pseudo classes go before the pseudo elements? And I mean, that's just, it's order of, I guess, size is the best way I would put it. I mean, one, like Christopher just said, applies to the entire element.
Right.
I mean, the pseudo classes apply to the entire element. Whatever properties put on it is for the entire element. Whereas the pseudo element is a smaller part of that. So it goes from less specific to more specific, and that's the way you would order it in your CSS selector.
Exactly, yeah, because I'm trying to drill down into it. So I'm starting at the div tag, so I'm looking for, hey, I want a div tag. Okay, now inside this div tag, I'm looking for just the first one.
Yeah.
And so then inside of just that first one, now I want that first letter. So I'm really just kind of drilling right down on into it. So yeah, that's a perfect way to describe it.
Yeah, because it wouldn't make sense if you said, well, what is the first child of a selected line? I mean, that's not something that really makes sense.
Yep.
Logic-wise, I don't know how to put that.
No, that's perfect. That's perfect. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So, pseudo classes, pseudo elements, and again, it gives you that ability to go in and find exactly what it is that you're looking for. Now,